Okay, this is my project. It is in C, but in a program. So if you don't know the piece in C, it's by Terry Riley. There's 53 different patterns that the players are given, and then they kind of have to like move through the patterns as a group. But the players make the decisions on which part to play at which time. Um, and I wanted to recreate that in a program. So I'm going to go ahead and show you what I made. First I'm going to show some controls. So up here we have the start and stop and this big audio button. That's just to be like, okay, the audio is on now. And then you press start when you want to start the song. There's these sliders that control the volume for different things. Patterns is just like the majority of musicians. And then C, it controls the reoccurring C note that's played throughout the entire song. And then master controls like the overall volume. Next we have time spent on a pattern. That there's a range, a min and a max, and this is in seconds. So for a given pattern, a musician will spend between the minimum and the maximum amount of time on that pattern before going and moving on to the next one. Then down here we can change the number of musicians we have. For example, we can have 50, or we could even just have like 2. Then we have our starting pattern. Normally you would start like on the first or the second one, but if you for some reason wanted to try something else, you can change that. Then last thing, we have our tone of C. So our reoccurring C, we can change which wave it plays. So right now it's on the saw wave, but we also have a sine wave, triangle, and a square wave. And then some different presets, which just like load in different values for all the other things. Okay, and then here is the cool part, is this big black box. You see all these different like rectangles that are different shades of blue. Those represent the different musicians. And when we play the song, they'll slowly move up to the top. And their Y position, or the height that they're at, represents which pattern they're on. You can also see which pattern they're on this table over here. The left is which musician it is, the right is what pattern they're on. So I'm going to go ahead and just turn the time spent down to 1 so we move through it really quickly. And if you want to listen to like a longer version, you can download the application and play it yourself and mess around with some of these different things. So let's see if it works. probably go ahead and stop it here. Once all the parts reach the last pattern, they just repeat that pattern until you press stop. So, it's pretty cool seeing the visualization. There's a couple things I'd like to add on real quick. There's some features that I would have liked to work on and include, but I didn't really get around to it, just so I could actually finish the project. But this project did help me realize that actual musicians have to have a lot of like intuitiveness about how they play, and how what they play affects the musicality of the piece. Something I struggled with here was getting the different parts to blend together really well, and it's difficult because at first they would all just play at the same volume, and you'd have all these different parts playing the same tone at the same volume, and it's just sounded like a big fat mess. So some things that I did do is just like these 4 different waves here. All of the different musicians are split between these 4 waves, so that kind of changes the color and the tonality of all the musicians to make it a little bit less samey. Something else I did is that it takes the average of which pattern the musicians are on. For example, here you can see like all of the different numbers that were changing. It takes the average of all those, and then for each musician it finds how far away it is from that average, and uses that to play quieter if they're farther away from the average. So if one of them is super far behind or super far ahead, they'll play a little bit quieter to kind of stick the sound around one singular pattern or a couple different patterns. Some things I would have liked to add on is panning, having like different sounds in your left and right ears would be really cool. Kind of adding that like spatial complexity would be really interesting. Also really adding some more behavior to the musicians to make them stick together or spread apart. Sometimes, because right now it is just kind of random, the musicians can all be playing on the same part, or they can all be playing different things, and generally when real musicians play the piece, they try and stick around the same area but also diversify it enough to make it sound interesting. And because making something sound interesting or something sound good is very subjective, it was pretty difficult to try and get close to that using programming, which is very objective, and you really have to define what you want. Last thing before I close the video, I just want to show what some of the programming looks like. This is made using Max MSP, which has all these different blocks and these connections between them to communicate between the different blocks. I also have this other patcher. This is the musician. So this is instantiated however many times you want. Yeah, I'm not going to explain the whole thing because it's complicated, but feel free to look around the code if you want. Alright, well, you should be able to find this application on any of the links I provided, and you can just download it, open up the application, and then try out some of these controls. Thank you.